We're going to continue our presentation on cancer clusters and our concerns for the Waycross, Georgia area. In the previous presentation, we discussed do we have a cancer cluster, and we decided that we do. And in this part, we're going to discuss what are the pathways of exposure. Part 2 are pathways of exposure. After determining, which we have determined, that we do have a cancer cluster, and we know that we have chemicals that could cause these specific types of cancers. So the next thing to determine, is there a pathway of exposure? That means, can the chemicals get from the locations where they originated from to the children or to the adults to infect them? And so we're going to look at the possible pathways of exposure. These pathways can include water, air, or soil. Water can be drinking water. It can be groundwater, which is usually defined as from a few inches below the surface, about 6 inches below the surface, down to about 50 feet. So that's considered groundwater. And then there's surface water. That's what you see running off in the canals, and when it rains, it runs off. Okay? The drinking water comes from various different aquifers. So the aquifers, the groundwater, I told you, was like down to about 50 feet or something like that. And then you have these different aquifers in our area. A more shallow aquifer that goes down to 250, 300 feet, and then you have the deep Floridian aquifer that goes down much further. Air can be indoor air or outdoor air, and this includes vapor intrusion. Vapor intrusion is really a groundwater plume, so you get contaminants that get in that groundwater section. That groundwater flows around in the community, and the plume is either under or near your home, and those chemicals evaporate out of the plume, and the fumes actually enter your home. So they can enter through holes in or cracks in your slabs. They can enter in various different manners. Because the children that we have in the Cancer Cluster 1 and Cancer Cluster 2 are spread over a large area, we pretty much can narrow our pathways down to basically air or water. It's doubtful that the soil is contaminated all the way out in some of these areas. Two factors to keep in mind as we go through this is that we could have a single source that is causing the water and the air problem, or we could have multiple sources that have the same chemicals. And I'm not picking on CSX here, but CSX has train cars that come through their location, and CSX in the past has washed out and cleaned those train cars, but they also have GATX, which cleans out those same train cars that went through the CSX yard. The second important factor is that the toxicologists have said that the children that are under 5 years old most likely got exposed in the womb. Okay, which is a very important factor we're going to have to look at. In this slide, we discuss what companies have known chemical releases, what those chemicals are that were released. We also discuss other chemicals that would be present with that industry's type of business. And then we also discuss how are those chemicals released? Are they released by air or water? The first one of concern is CSX. It has groundwater contamination. It is a known RCRA site, which means that it is a federally recognized contaminated area. It is overseen by the the Georgia Department of Environmental Protection, rather than the federal government. We all know what CSX does, but you might not know that they also clean rail cars out there, or have cleaned rail cars in the past. They work on engines, so they do a lot of things. It's not just trains coming through that yard, which have their own potential for hazard. Their known chemicals are metals, and those metals can be radioactive. We also know that they have PAHs, which are the polyaromatic hydrocarbons, dioxins and furans, vinyl chloride, TCE, pesticides, including some of the ones that we're concerned with. So CSX has quite a few chemicals that can cause the sarcomas and the sarcomas, including the rare rhabdomyosarcomas and the lymphomas. Atlanta Gas has groundwater contamination. That site has been out of business since the 60s. They were a manufactured gas plant, which means that they basically created and had oil and gasoline type products there. So chemicals of concern would be dioxins, furans, PAHs, and benzene products. 7 Out was a wastewater treatment facility. It was only in operation for a short period of time, and they had a little bit of surface water contamination and soil contamination. With that, we know that there were some PAHs. I think there were seen some dioxins and furans. We're going to now look at the water pathways. We're going to focus on GATX, AGL, and CSX. And the reason why we're focusing on those is because they all had groundwater releases, and they had wells close to the areas of concern. In other words, close to their sources. So if groundwater, which is what feeds these wells, if the groundwater gets down into the wells, or gets sucked down into the wells and then back up the tubes, the pipes, then they could contaminate large areas. These 3 locations have chemicals that may be of concern. So we have one county well that is within the CSX area of Plume, and that's the Gilchrist Park well. We have another county well that is within concern areas of CSX and AGL area. That's the Emerson Park well. We have one city well within the CSX AGL area. That is city well number 1, and it was taken offline by the city of Waycross. There is also one city well. It's under the section that's called Waycross Ware County Industrial Park area, that is within the GATX area, and it was also taken offline by the city of Waycross and closed. On our upcoming maps, we have provided you with a legend. The red circles are the well locations, blue lines are the direction the groundwater is to flow. Well number 1 is the Gilchrist Park well. Well number 2 is the Emerson Park well. Well number 3 is a city well that was taken offline. Well number 4 is a city well also that was taken offline by the city. The little squiggly marks are the contaminated locations, or the locations that have chemicals of concern. The black circles are the first set of children that were on our first cancer cluster group. Okay, and then the black X's represent the second cancer cluster group. The locations of the wells close to CSX and Atlanta Gas. Remember, the red circles are our wells. So well number 1 and number 2 are county wells. Well number 1 is the Gilchrist well. Right above the circle where the Gilchrist well is, you'll see some blue arrows. Those are the groundwater, the direction that the groundwater flows from the CSX site, and that's according to CSX documents. So those little red, warning signs there are all the RCRA sites on CSX. Those 5 or 6 there at the top. Then at the, if we go to the left, over by well number 2, well number 2 is the Emerson Park well, which is circled in red, and there's a 2 beside it. And then you'll see the blue lines above that. EPA told us in their documents regarding 7 out that the water on the north side of CSX ran west. So all of this water from the west, all of this, contamination that may be present on the west, whether on the west side of the CSX property, whether it's 7 out or Atlantic Gas, or these other potential sites down here, these newer operations that CSX has, all of that groundwater would flow to the left towards the Emerson Park well. So that's why Gilchrist and Emerson Park wells are of interest to us. Also, you should note that the black circles are locations of some of the children that were in the first cluster of children who had cancer. And these children in this first cluster that we're kind of identifying here were all children, or these locations where they're at, were all on county water that we have circled here. The third location, the third well that we're concerned about, is a well that is within downtown Waycross area. And it is a city well. So the city has 2 wells in the downtown area. One of them, the one closest to CSX, they have taken offline. The X's over the locations where the children are, so the little balloons are the children, cancer cases. The X's indicate that they were on city water. The blues are the sarcomas. So you can see that those 3 blue balloons there that are identified are all rhabdomyosarcomas, and those were the locations or approximate locations. They're not exact on any of these, but those were the approximate locations of the rhabdomyosarcomas. And so they were all on city water. And the fact that that city well has come offline is a good thing, but we need to understand why it went offline. The fourth well of concern is this well number 4, which is actually a city well, but it's in the industrial park. So when you look it up online, it's going to say Waycross, Ware County Industrial Park. The reason why this well is of concern to us is because of its location and proximity to GATX. Very, very near to GATX. This well was also taken offline by the city of Waycross, but we don't have access to those records, and that's one of the things we'll talk about later. So what records are available? If you go to georgiadrinkingwater.net, you can search by county. So you're going to go to Ware County, and then once you're into Ware County, there's all the different water systems. The four systems that you're going to look at are the City of Waycross, the City of Waycross Ware Industrial Park, Satilla, Ware County, which is the Ware County wells, and then there's another Satilla, which is, it'll say Ware County East. So the Ware County East has the Gilchrist Park well on it. The Ware County West has the Emerson Park on it. The industrial park, of course, has the industrial park stuff, and then, of course, the City of Waycross has the well number 101, which was close to CSX and was taken offline. When you go to georgiadrinkingwater.net, there is some information that you will find there. For instance, besides the well names, which I told you how to get to those, you'll be able to find the different testing locations. You'll notice that some of the water samples that were taken in and that are available, they'll say either entry versus finished water. Entry water is water that's gone, that's part of the drinking water system, but it's prior, so that's the sampling data prior to any kind of treatment. And then once it's been treated and they're supposed to have taken out the contaminants, then it becomes what's called finished water. They retest it again, and they are supposed to show us the finished water data. In Waycross and Ware County, they don't provide us any entry water data. They only provide us finished water data. So that's really important, and we're going to talk about that in a few minutes. But other information that you can get from that site are the type of test, their testing schedules. If you have any general information about water permitting or the engineering department, you can call the Georgia Department of EPD, and Kirk Chase is who you'd speak to. So basically in part 2, we discussed the potential pathways, and specifically we talked about the well locations around those pathways of concern. Please stay with us for part 3 and part 4, because part 3 we're going to actually discuss what has been found in the wells, and then we are also going to discuss our need for more information. At this point, though, I want to remind you of the CDC meeting coming up March 15th, and we want to get you to encourage the CDC, the ASTDR, and the Georgia Department of Health to include the county water and the city water as part of their investigation. You're going to learn more about this later, but I've given you enough information to see that those wells should be of concern.